We have just witnessed one of the more confusing trades in NBA history, and let me explain why in today's video why this isn't going to be beneficial for both teams. I'm going to be discussing the trades as well as looking at it from both point of view. So if you're ready to watch, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let's get into today's video. So for those who may have missed this last night or don't know the entire details, this is what happened last night. The Minnesota Timberwolves and the New York Knicks made a massive trade, which included sending Karl-Anthony Towns to the New York Knicks in exchange for Julius Randle, Donte Divincenzo, and a first-round pick via Detroit. I will explain that Detroit pick in just 1 second, and the Knicks needed to send out more salary, so they sent out DaQuan Jeffries, draft picks, and cash consideration to the Charlotte Hornets. Now, why is this a bizarre trade, you ask? Let's talk about this from the Timberwolves' point of view, first of all. You traded Karl-Anthony Towns. That was one of the best stretch big men in the entire league. Let's be honest. And the reason that him and the reason him and Rudy Gobert worked so well together was because the fact that Karl-Anthony Towns was able to shoot a ton of threes, but also hit them at a really good clip as well. Now, in terms of Julius Randle, this is where I don't like this from the Minnesota Timberwolves point of view. You had a roster with Karl-Anthony Towns, Rudy Gobert. I'm not saying Karl-Anthony Towns by any means is a good defensive center, but you had one of the best combinations of really just throwing off the Denver Nuggets. In the entire Western Conference, no other team besides the Timberwolves can say they're better structured to really stop Nikola Jokic. Again, you saw Nikola Jokic, percentage-wise anyways, have some awfully shooting games against the Timberwolves, and that was one of the reasons. Rudy Gobert did his thing. You know what? He gets a lot of criticism. But Karl-Anthony Towns also stepped in, played some good defense at times on Nikola Jokic as well. And I know what people are going to say. They're going to say, well, they got Naz Reid. Do not worry. We don't need Karl-Anthony Towns. Actually, the difference is Naz Reid is 6'9", 264 pounds. Nikola Jokic is 6'11", 284 pounds. So that 20 pounds and 2 inches make a big, big difference. So yes, Naz Reid is a good defensive player, but you can't put him all the time. And especially when you recall the series between the Nuggets and the Timberwolves, we saw Rudy Gobert get in foul trouble. Who was guarding Jokic? You know what? You saw who it was. So again, this is a weird trade for the New York Knicks. Let's talk about some of the other pieces they got back. Julius Randle. Personally, I don't like this at all. Julius Randle. So to give you a perspective of Karl-Anthony Towns and Julius Randle, we'll get to the other pieces in a second. But Karl-Anthony Towns and Julius Randle both took 5.3 attempts from the three-point line. One shot 41%, the other shot 31% from the three-point line. I don't think you should have to guess who shot what. So I don't really like this fit for the Timberwolves. You made the Western Conference. Why would you want to trade Karl-Anthony Towns? People are going to run to the comment section and say salary. Listen to me. What good is money that you're potentially getting off if you're not attracting free agents? Julius Randle also has a player option for next season, close to, I believe, $32 million, which he isn't going to take. He wants more money. We know how Julius Randle operates. And just when you talk about how the team was structured around Anthony Edwards, most importantly, I don't like this one bit for the Timberwolves at all. Because simply, even if Julius Randle leaves in free agency next year, people are going to say, well, you got off of all this money from Karl-Anthony Towns and so you saved it. No, you're still going to be past the salary cap. And it's not as if you get the extra $30-40 million you spend on another free agent. You can't. You'll have maybe the mid-level exception, and that's about it. So this doesn't benefit Minnesota in any way, shape, or form. Rudy Gobert, Julius Randle is going to be a really odd fit. We know where Julius Randle likes to operate is the mid-range game and the paint. Now, tell me how this is going to work for the Timberwolves, And most importantly, Anthony Edwards also likes to attack the basket as well. So now you got three guys really trying to get in there when, Rudy Gobert is going to be there, Julius Randle is going to be there, and all these reports about the Minnesota Timberwolves are all on Naz Reid. That's why they traded Karl-Anthony Towns. I don't firmly believe that. Because if that was the case, you would have traded Karl-Anthony Towns for another position, and then you would have inserted Naz Reid into the power forward position, which isn't the case because Julius Randle will be starting. Now let's talk about some of the other pieces as well. Donte Divincenzo. Donte Divincenzo is a player that played spectacular from the New York Knicks. But a lot of fans are saying, well, this is good. Minnesota's got more depth. Is it really? Let's take a look at Donte Divincenzo's stat here before I talk more about him. Now, we know Donte Divincenzo had a spectacular season with the New York Knicks, the Villanova guys. We know how they played. But taking a look at his stats here, let me rephrase why I don't think this is as big of an addition as many people believe it to be. We know certain players play well when they play with their favorite players. They're in the right system. But look at his stats here. He averaged 15 and a half points with the New York Knicks. Is he going to average that much with the Minnesota Timberwolves? I don't think so. And you look at the previous seasons, he's won on some really good teams, the Warriors, the Milwaukee Bucks, the Kings. Yet he has never averaged more than 10.3 points, which he did with the Kings a few seasons back. But one thing I do want to say, the reason he performed so well with the Knicks is because look at that field goal attempts per game, 12.4 field goal attempts per game. Also shot at 8.7 3-point attempts per game as well. So when you take those field goal attempts into consideration, you really think he's going to get that with the Minnesota Timberwolves? Again, I don't necessarily think so. There's a lot of injuries that happened. He had a bigger role on the Knicks. That's why he performed the way he did. He's someone that will give you 9, 10 points a game. I don't know how much of a benefit that is to a team like the Minnesota Timberwolves. I find their bench is fairly decent. You know, they got an interesting player in Rob Dillingham, but again, it isn't a big of a deal as many people are believing, making it out to be. Now, let's talk about that Detroit first round pick because my initial surprise was, wow, they got the Pistons pick. This should be good, right? No, the pick is actually heavily protected. It's 1 to 13 in this coming draft. The following season, if it doesn't convey, it's 1 to 11. The following season is 1 to 5. So the likelihood that it conveys the next couple seasons is highly unlikely. So essentially, you got to pick that may be converting in 3 seasons. If not, if the Pistons are so bad, then essentially you just get Donte DiVincenzo and Julius Randle for 1 season. So again, I understand where the mindset of moving Karl-Anthony Towns was, okay, makes sense. You're getting rid of all this money, but Minnesota isn't a team that attracts free agents. You're not the LA, you're not the Chicago, you're not the Knicks, you're not a Texas team that has low taxes, which would, entice players to go there. So Minnesota isn't a player destination, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. If anything, they should have traded Karl-Anthony Towns for a point of weakness, which should have been the point guard position. Mike Conley is going to be 37 by the time season starts. He doesn't have a lot in him for next season or so, however long he has before retirement. Rob Dillingham is a rookie, and that's putting a lot of faith in 2 point guards, one that's supposed to retire soon and one that's just coming into the league. That should have been the position they really aimed at. But let's talk about this from the New York Knicks point. Enough of the Timberwolves. Let's talk about this from the Knicks point of view. Everyone is excited. They got a stretch big. They can match up versus the Boston Celtics. But let's talk about his defensive deficiency. Karl-Anthony Towns isn't a good defensive player. So when we talk about this team, the New York Knicks team, and what they did to match up versus a Boston Celtics team, this isn't all that great because when you talk about Karl-Anthony Towns can stretch the floor, so can Kristaps Porzingis. One thing Kristaps has that Karl-Anthony doesn't is shot blocking ability. Kristaps Porzingis he may not be very mobile, but one thing he does is block shots and he protects the rim very well. And Karl-Anthony Towns, not so much. So now all of a sudden you look at the New York Knicks, you see their center position at Karl-Anthony Towns. It's great. He's got a lot of offense, but is that something the Knicks really needed? They have a lot of offense already from Jalen Brunson to Mikal Bridges to even OG Anunoby can give you 15, 16, 17 points a night, right? So it wasn't something that they really needed. I understand why a lot of fans, a lot of people, my media will be very excited about this move. They got a stretch big. This works out perfectly. And in theory, it does. But on the defensive side, let's pretend for a moment, the New York Knicks, let's say they face Giannis Antetokounmpo or the 76ers in the second round. Do you think anyone is stopping Giannis from getting to the rim? Absolutely not. Definitely not Karl-Anthony Towns. Do you think who's guarding Joel Embiid consistently and doing a good job? Definitely not Karl-Anthony Towns. So now before we even face the Boston Celtics, we have all these hurdles that the New York Knicks are supposed to kind of get through. And now all of a sudden you look at Karl-Anthony Towns and you're looking at his defense and saying, hey, wait a second. Now what are we going to do to game plan against Giannis? What are we going to do to game plan against someone like Joel Embiid, right? So I know Mitchell Robinson is still there, and maybe someone even throws the idea of playing Mitchell Robinson and Karl-Anthony Towns together. The only difference is this isn't the same duo as Rudy Gobert. Rudy Gobert, for all the criticism he gets, he is so much more better than Mitchell Robinson on the defensive side. And just given his injury history, Mitchell Robinson isn't a player that you can consistently rely on to be healthy. So look, and this might help him win a lot of regular season games, but I don't know how I feel about this personally speaking for the Knicks point of view. You get a center that can shoot. You got a center that can score. That's great. But what happens when you have to play defense? That's the big thing. I mean, who's being that rim protector for you because Karl-Anthony Towns definitely isn't. It's not going to be Jalen Brunson. It's not going to be OG or Mikal Bridges or even Josh Hart. So that's where all the questions start to arise, right? So again, I find this trade to be a little bit odd for both teams. I understand from the Knicks' point of view that, listen, you got rid of Julius's contract. He wasn't going to fit in. That's great. There's also a report apparently Donte DiVincenzo wasn't happy with his potentially reduced role with Mikal Bridges being there now, right? So I don't really like this team trade for both sides, if you ask me, but I'm very curious to hear what you guys think. Let me know your thoughts down in the comment section below. Make sure to hit the subscribe button on your way out. That will be it for today's video. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys have yourselves a great day.